By popular demand, we are talking about a day with the minimalist diet. What I eat, how I eat it, and when I eat it to avoid complexity bias and decision fatigue. So let's talk about it. A few videos back, I put out a video on the minimalist diet. It was the idea of we make things so complex, including our food and our choices and what we're going to eat, when we're going to eat, how we're going to eat it, that we are adding to our complexity bias. And again, creating decision fatigue on things that, well, don't have to be that way. Again, the simple solves the complex. So by popular demand, we're talking about a day with my minimalist diet. A couple things up front. First of all, a disclaimer or two. I'm not a registered or licensed dietitian. I'm not a doctor or physician. Please consult with your healthcare professional before making any changes based on what we're talking about. But this video is about how I do it. Your mileage may vary, your results may vary, and quite possibly so should your foods and amounts and even how you prepare them. So with that said, let's dive in. First of all, if you're new here, I want to welcome you to the channel. My name is Eric Herdman. I'm a professional speaker, and I talk about how to optimize your health, your brain, your focus, all things to make us more productive and also better communicators and leaders. So in this video, we're talking about the minimalist diet. As I said a few weeks ago, I put out a video on how to just kind of streamline, or one of the areas we can streamline, and that is our food and our food choices and our diet. But I had so much feedback, positive feedback, people asking questions, even on social media, people messaging me and commenting, saying, hey, what do you do with this? Or how do you handle this? Or what do you eat? And so I wanted to talk about that for a few moments. So first of all, as I said, this is something that works for me. I know I've already given you my disclaimers, but even before you copy and paste everything that you hear and see and take notes on, or however you're writing or capturing things, before you just copy and paste and do it, find out what works for you. This took me decades to figure this out. I'm hoping that I can streamline some of the choices and ultimately make it so you can have a minimalist diet, so that you can focus on the most important things. Not that food and nutrition aren't, but how we can make these things automatic or reduce the amount of time and energy and focus that we have to spend on them, so that we can spend time doing the meaningful things. And it's not just work either. Sometimes it's just life or relationships or family or friends. And these things we're talking about just get in the way, and they make things complex, and they drain us. Or we make bad choices, and then we don't feel good, either psychologically or physiologically or both, because we knew we shouldn't have eaten that or we shouldn't have done that. Also, I am not in the camp of people that like to demonize food. So just know that. Again, these are my choices, a couple decades here, maybe even more like 4 decades in some cases, on figuring all of this out. Also, backstory as far as how I came to this place. Many of you know I have been vegan. I have been vegetarian. I have been carnivore. I have tried keto. I've tried paleo. Back in the 80s, I did no fat, low fat, high carbohydrates. You name it, I probably have tested it or done it even for protracted periods of time. So with that said, let's dive in. Let me pull up a couple other screens here. So if you'll bear with me, I'm just going to look away for a moment and pull up a couple things here that I want to be able to show you. So let's talk about the foods that I eat in my minimalist diet. We'll talk about the foods, and then at the end of this, I'll give you a rundown of how I put it all together, what a day of eating looks like. So first of all, you can see over here on this graphic, I have my proteins listed at the top. That's on purpose. I prioritize protein above anything and everything else. The proteins I eat, you can see, sirloin steak. I eat a lot of ground beef. 93.7 is the fat percentages. And by the way, I can probably get rid of another 2 or 3% of fat. When I cook it, I will not only strain it, I will rinse it as well. Bison, ground bison, don't need to worry about rinsing that. Bison has a pretty high water content, and it tends to cook off very, very quickly. And by the way, bison is not very fatty, so there's not a lot of fat left over as well. I eat eggs, 2 to 3 whole eggs a day. Then I backfill the protein requirement, for example, around breakfast. I backfill that with egg whites to bring the protein up to where I need to be. By the way, the reason I add egg whites is so that I can keep the calories lower and the fat lower. Oftentimes, again, with eggs, the calories come from the fat, from the yolks. So I'll do a couple, like I said, 2 to 3 egg whites, depending on my energy demands that day, my protein demands. And also then I get a lot of the vitamins, a lot of the choline, especially out of the yolks. But then I just bring the egg whites in and just, again, backfill that or bring that amount of protein up with the egg whites. I also eat a fair amount of Greek yogurt every day, anywhere from 6 to 9 ounces, again, depending on my energy demands. This is all programmed out 7 days in advance. So you're probably thinking, well, that's a lot of thinking along the way. No, I take Sunday and I program all of my meals out into my calendar. I know probably a lot for some of you, but it works for me to do that. And that way the decision's made. I make the decision on Sunday, typically in the morning for the week. And not only are the meals planned, but they're scheduled on my calendar as well. Carbohydrates, as you can see, cream of rice 1 time a day, typically pre-workout. It may be post-workout, depending on the time of day that I have to eat and work out. I eat a lot of white rice and white potatoes. Typically, those are prepared either boiled white potatoes, or if I'm in a pinch and I want it to be somewhat a little fresher, I'll do a microwave. I know some of you are probably like microwave fresh, but as far as a baked potato, it pretty much does the job. And the fats, well, pretty much as they appear in the food that I eat. So sirloin steak, a little bit in the ground beef, a little bit in the bison, and then of course the eggs. I typically eat no-fat Fage or some sort of Greek yogurt, but 0 fat there. I will, depending on what I'm cooking and how I'm cooking it, I'll use some olive oil or coconut oil for cooking. So if I'm making scrambled eggs, I'll use a nonstick skillet, but I will spray it with just a little bit of coconut oil, for example, and then wipe it up or kind of thin it out a little bit, and then just go from there. So this is the list of proteins that I eat. And so you'll see in a moment, the shopping list is pretty simple. I know it's a list of things, but it's going to be pretty simple once we take a look at it. Now, the next graphic I want to show you, some of you are wondering, well, it doesn't look like there's any kind of fruits or veggies on there. There's not. I don't eat a lot of fruit, don't eat a lot of veggies, but I do eat it. So here's what happens with this. Fruits and veggies, 3 servings of blueberries a week. I just try to get 3 in. That might be 3 days in a row. That might be every other day. You get the idea. But 3 servings of blueberries. A serving, by the way, is typically 3/4 of a cup. I do frozen blueberries. That way they're always readily available. And I can just simply, as I prep my meals for the week, I can just portion those out and they'll thaw out in the refrigerator over time. I will eat some spinach and some Brussels sprouts. And that's pretty much the extent of the fruits and veggies. In the summertime, if the caloric demands are such that I need a little more carbohydrates or calories, I will add a medium orange in to one of my meals a couple times a week. But that's not something that's routine, that's not normal, and of course it's also based on my energy demand. That's very important to understand. How much energy am I going to be expending in that given day? Liquids, coffee. Liquids, coffee. Let me say that again, coffee. I wake up every morning, I have 28 ounces of water with a pinch of Himalayan salt in it. And then shortly after that, I'll have a couple really strong cups of coffee. Later in the morning, I'll have another one, or, okay, let's be honest, another 2 cups of coffee later in the morning. Typically when I begin speaking or start working if it's a work day and not a presentation day. But I will have another couple cups of coffee, again, two in the morning and then first thing, and then two later when I start working, and that's it for the day. And by the way, that second bout of coffee, those second 2 cups of coffee, those are typically in and done by 9:15. So they're very far away from interfering with any sleep. Typically, I will have a Liquid Death sparkling plain flavored water once a day. I like to have that in the afternoon. Typically, I put it between lunch and dinner. The sparkling, the carbonation in it tends to give you a little satiety, make you feel a little full at the same time. It's just plain. It doesn't have any sugar in it, so it is adding to my water consumption for the day. And then the only other beverage I drink is water. And I typically stick to a very simple formula that I automatically know in my head, and that is half of my body weight in ounces. I weigh approximately 202, 203 pounds. So 101, 102 ounces of water throughout the day. My seasoning's pretty simple here. Salt. I have the iodized salt a couple times a day. A couple times a day, I will use pink Himalayan salt. As I mentioned, it's a pinch in my water. I typically cook the sirloin steaks with a really coarse Himalayan salt, and then pepper. These things, again, if you talk to your doctor, you'll know if you can use them or should use them. And then if you are able to use them, pretty much just use it to your level of preference. How much you use up to your preference, what your taste and your preferences are for salt and pepper. So those are the foods: proteins, carbohydrates, fats, a little bit on fruits and veggies, a little bit on the liquids, and a little bit on the seasonings. The other thing I wanted to show you is actually a live shot. Well, not live, I've recorded it, but it is a real grocery list that I use. It's on my iPhone, very simple to see. I'll leave this play here for a moment so you can see it, but nothing fancy there. There's the beef. You can see the eggs. You can see the carbohydrates there. This particular shopping experience. This is what I was purchasing, and that's my list. And also, those of you that know that I'm a big fan of list, there it is. That's just how I do it. Simple Apple's reminder list that now, of course, it will use artificial intelligence to categorize those items. I don't have to even categorize them. I just punch them in, and they categorize them, and then I just go and shop. So another feature there to make things a little more simple. And by the way, just to let you know, all I do is hit this ellipses up in the top, and I have it show completed items, and then I just uncheck them. So I don't even really type things in that much because I'm buying the same thing every week, every shopping experience over and over and over again. So those are the foods. A little bit about how, of course, I prepare them. You saw the oil and the seasoning there. Let's talk about a typical day of eating. And then we'll wrap things up by talking about really the benefits that I get from this. Not only the benefits in the complexity bias and decision fatigue, but also the physical and mental advantages or benefits that eating like this, eating these particular foods, again, for me, what I experience. So first of all, I will typically have my last meal of the day. Yes, I'm starting with the day before because that's important in this context because I typically eat my last meal early. I was a big intermittent faster for nearly a decade, and it's like a lot of things with our bodies, exercise and diet. It worked until it didn't, and then I stopped. So once it wasn't working, and there was a whole nother story there. If you want me to do a video on it, just comment below, and I'll do a little video on intermittent fasting pros or cons and best way to get the most out of that. But I typically eat my last meal early. What is early? Well, it really depends on my sleep schedule. I will stop eating and make sure I eat 3 hours before I'm going to go to sleep. So if I know that not bed, but actual sleep, there's a difference. If you've ever looked at your sleep trackers or ever tracked your sleep or look at how sleep trackers work, there's a period of latency there. My latency typically is 20 to 30 minutes, a little longer than I would like. So basically, when I say I'm going to bed, that might be at the top of the hour, but I don't fall asleep until about 20, 30 minutes later. So I stop eating 3 hours before I go to sleep. And some days that's at 3 o'clock, some days that's at 4 o'clock, but very rarely, unless I'm traveling or out to dinner with my wife or friends, family, that sort of thing, social gatherings, will I even eat past 5 o'clock. Uh, there are occasions, again, social settings, sometimes demands, will make it so that I eat at 6, but that's very rare. I could count those on one hand for a year, how many times I eat at 6 or later. So let's just say that I stop eating at 3 o'clock. That gives me 3 or 4 hours before I go to bed because, well, the way my work schedule is, sometimes speaking schedule, I have to get up very early to do an event virtually or even sometimes in person. I have a lot of clients that like to start at 7 or 8. That means I've got to be there an hour and a half before to set up. I think you can see what's happening. I get up pretty early. So once I stop eating, the clock starts running, and I do typically 12 to 13 hours of no food. Well, that's pretty easy to do. First of all, those 3 hours after I get done eating, before I go to sleep, I get time to relax and unwind and do normal things, read books, pet my dogs, hang out with my wife, that sort of thing. And then, of course, I'm sleeping. Hopefully, I'm sleeping 7 to 7.5 hours. So what are we at? About 10, 10 and a half. Well, by the time I get up and have some water and get to coffee, you can see that it's 12 or 13 hours since my last meal. First meal of the day is typically that cream of rice with some egg whites as a pre-workout. I will use a little stevia in that. I didn't put it on the list because I don't use it that often, but occasionally I'll put some cinnamon and a pinch of stevia in cream of rice and egg whites. That's my pre-workout meal. Sits very well, easy to get in, quick to prepare. It's literally liquid egg whites, cream of rice, microwave, and you eat it and you can work out. It's just enough protein to cover me for the duration of the workout and a little bit afterwards. Same thing for the carbohydrates. Enough for, required for the energy to get through the workout and then done. Then I typically will come back from the gym after that workout, and I'll either start working or I'll speak for a little bit, and then I'll have my breakfast or second meal, which is typically, as I said in the bit we were talking about a moment ago on the foods, a couple of eggs, whole eggs. The rest of the protein will come from the egg whites, and then typically I have potatoes or rice. Most of the time will just put all that in a skillet and do the eggs and then throw either cooked rice in already, or I sometimes will have the rice cooker going and have a whole batch of rice ready. But again, just portion out what I need, eat that, and I'm back to work. Again, not much as far as time on that. If you've ever cooked scrambled eggs, even with egg whites, it doesn't take long at all. So we're talking minutes here. We're talking 5 minutes. If the rice, like I said, is either ready the day before and I'm adding it in, or if the rice cooker was set in the morning, that takes a few minutes to set up, not a big deal. I just scoop that out. We're done. I'm back to work. Lunch is typically the next meal, meal number 3. That's probably some ground beef or ground bison. And yes, you guessed it, potatoes or rice. I typically will throw some spinach in. Oh, by the way, I do sometimes stir some spinach into the scrambled egg mix at breakfast, depending on what my preference is at that time. But I'll have a handful, which is about a cup of spinach at lunchtime, mixed in with the bison or the ground beef and rice. And again, salt and pepper to taste. Then mid-afternoon, I mentioned I'll have a death wish, or excuse me, a liquid death. Death wish is the coffee. A lot of liquid death a lot of death wish in my beverages here. But yes, the coffee is Death Wish coffee, and the sparkling water that I have around mid-afternoon is Liquid Death, and I'll have that. And then the next meal, a few hours after that, in the last meal of the day, is typically some sirloin steak, some Brussels sprouts, and either, again, rice or potatoes. But the only mention that I wanted to make about any kind of amounts, because, again, you're going to be your numbers are probably different than mine. Your energy demands, your timing, um, even some of the things with your work schedule, going to make it so you have different amounts than me. So that's why this video is not about ounces and cups and that sort of thing, specific measurements, because that's just not how to do something. I'm not doing you right if I make that, because then you think that's what you have to do, or you wonder if that's what you should do. Make the decisions based on your protein and energy demands. But I will typically have a little less carbohydrates at that last meal. There is an energy effect. You do get energy off of carbohydrates. And you don't even have to try to utilize them. A lot of times just by putting carbohydrates in, they're just kind of sitting there like, okay, we got some energy now, let's go do something. So I typically will put the majority of my carbohydrates pre and post workout. And then whatever's left, then I divide up between lunch and dinner. And typically I will even, some days, again, depending on my energy demands, I'll put a little bit more in my lunch and pull back a little bit from dinner, because I found that having that a lot of extra carbohydrate energy in the evening, it can't keep you up. It can't keep you, kind of feeling like you're energized here. That's great for some of you that have or want to eat a little earlier, or do eat a little earlier, yet still have things to do in the evening. You can benefit from knowing that and doing that with your carbohydrates. But I typically pull back there a little bit. I still have carbohydrates, not demonizing. There's nothing wrong with them, but I typically will pull back a little bit. Over the day, though, if I'm supposed to have X number of grams between those 4 meals, I meet all of my protein, carbohydrate, and fat, as well as calorie requirements. And so that's a pretty typical day of eating there. And then that fast, what is a fast, 12 or 13 hours I don't even call it a fast, that 12 or 13 hours without food starts there. And that, of course, is where we started this section. A couple things to wrap up. First of all, the way that I eat, as I mentioned at the top of this video, works for me. You need to find the foods that work for you. The other thing I wanted to mention is some of the benefits that I get from this. These foods are foods that like me. That's my friend Stan Efforting's line. Stan says, I don't eat foods that I like. I eat foods that like me. And as I have known Stan and I started pursuing and thinking about, some of the things he's doing and some of the things he writes about, you're absolutely right. He's absolutely right that we should be eating foods that like us, that digest well, that energize us, that keep us clear-headed and not give us brain fog and don't make us bloated and gassy and that sort of thing. And so that's where a lot of these, as I said at the top of the video, that's where a lot of these choices for the foods that I eat come from. The other thing you can see, as I just mentioned about carbohydrates, is I try to utilize the carbohydrates. Another way people say this is, you earn your carbohydrates. I've either got a demand coming up, like I've mentioned with that pre-workout meal. I've got a workout coming up, so I need those carbohydrates for that workout. And after the workout, that meal, the breakfast meal, then that helps me recover from that workout, but it also is fueling me throughout the rest of the day, especially until my next meal. And then those carbohydrates get me to the next meal, and of course that takes us to where I ended talking about my day of eating, where really all I need is a small amount of carbohydrates to make sure that I sleep well, kind of top off the glycogen stores, so when I get up the next morning, I'm good to go there. But I don't have any brain fog. These foods energize me. I can't tell you the last time that I felt bloated, full, like, Thanksgiving dinner in the States in November, that full. None of that happens. Yet, as I mentioned, I'm 202 to, right now, 202, 203, typically run 202 to 207, somewhere in there, pounds. So I'm not, lacking here anything. But again, I feel energized. I recover from my workouts. I'm able to, again, some of these foods just help me manage stress because I'm able to have the energy to tackle things. I'm able to think clear-headed. I'm not distracted by being, hungry or hangry at times. And so it just works well for me. Most of the time, I can tell you, as far as satiety, I'm eating to about 70, 80% of fullness. And that's when I stop. And then there's probably, most of the times there's no food left when I get to that point because I've just done this so long. Some of the other things that you can expect from this is that some of these ways that people structure their food and the amounts and what's called the macronutrients or calories, whether you're eating in a surplus or maintenance or deficit, will help you with your body composition if that's something that you're inclined to look at or to tackle. One last thing that I wanted to address. Do I eat like this every single day, even when I'm traveling? No. I have some rules and some things I have as guidelines for this, and let me explain them here so you can kind of see that there's some nuance with this, but there is some wiggle room, but not a lot. If I'm in a town, if I travel somewhere and I'm going to be somewhere for 24, 26, definitely under 30 hours, I won't take or ship my food with me. My chief of staff is very good at setting up my travel app with all the restaurants that I know I can eat from. And so I know not only where they are, I know how to time it, and it's all planned out. And if you look at what I eat on the road, well, take for example, I was in Anaheim not too long ago. I had steak, white rice, and a spinach salad, which is just exactly what I would have had for dinner here at home. And breakfast, same thing. I can pretty much do the same thing on the road as far as potatoes or rice, or sometimes I'll have to do oatmeal instead of cream of rice, but those changes are very subtle and not monumental. If I'm going for 2 days, especially 3 days, my food will be shipped ahead of me. It'll arrive at the hotel, and I typically stay at hotels that I have the ability to have a kitchen, a small kitchen, sometimes even a stovetop, but a lot of times full-size refrigerator, full-size microwave, dishes, real dishes, and silverware, and so that makes things better. But again, that's, my choice. Your results and choices may vary. But this also makes it so, as you can see by that grocery list, even the food list that I shared here in this video, I'm not making a lot of decisions. I don't spend a lot of time in the grocery store. I don't spend a lot of time preparing meals, and that can be another video if you'd like to talk about how I prepare these meals or the time it takes. But even in this video, I kind of gave you a little snapshot of how many minutes, literally minutes, some of these meals can be prepared in. So thank you for letting me share that with you. And by the way, also thank you for sending me your comments and your messages and encouraging me to do this video. Again, if you have something you want me to cover or talk about, all you need to do is put that in the comments below, and we'll get that in the queue of videos we handle. So until next video, take care of yourself so you can take care of each other, and I will see you in that next video.